In the early 1900s, a revolution was brewing in factories across America and Europe. Workers were demanding something unprecedented in industrial society: 2 consecutive days off every week. Not 1 day for worship, but 2 full days of freedom. It would take decades of labor struggles, economic experiments, and social upheaval to create what we now take for granted. The weekend, those 48 hours of freedom that define modern life, took nearly a century to establish, and the story of how we got it reveals something disturbing about how easily we accept the arbitrary rhythms that control our lives. Think about your week. Monday through Friday, you're owned by obligations. Saturday and Sunday, you're free. This rhythm feels as natural as breathing, as inevitable as sunrise. But here's what's unsettling. There's nothing natural about it at all. The weekend is a human invention, no different from the hamburger or the credit card. Before the industrial age transformed work, the idea that an entire society would collectively stop working for 2 consecutive days would have seemed as revolutionary as proposing we all fly to work. We've structured our entire civilization around a pattern that didn't exist when your great-great-grandparents were born. Our cities empty and fill on a 7-day cycle. Our entertainment industries live and die by weekend box office numbers. Dating apps surge on Sunday nights. Emergency rooms know to staff up on Saturday evenings. Stock markets close. Even wars pause for weekends, mostly. But this isn't a story about progress or workers' rights, though those played their parts. This is about how determined labor movements and savvy industrialists accidentally created the temporal architecture of modern life, and how something that took a century to build is now being dismantled in real time. To understand how radical the weekend was, you need to know what came before it. For most of human history, work didn't have weekends because work wasn't separate from life. Farmers worked when crops demanded it. Artisans worked when they had orders. The rhythm was seasonal, not weekly. The 7-day week itself has ancient origins. The Babylonians developed a 7-day cycle, likely based on their observations of celestial bodies and lunar phases. Each day was associated with different planets and gods, but even then, the week was just a way to organize time, not work. The Babylonians didn't punch time clocks. The real disruption came with Christianity. Early Christians moved their day of rest from Saturday to Sunday, partly to honor Christ's resurrection, but mostly to differentiate themselves from Jews. By the early 4th century, Emperor Constantine had made Sunday a day of rest throughout much of the Roman Empire, but this was 1 day, not 2, and it was about worship, not leisure. The Industrial Revolution shattered this ancient rhythm completely. Suddenly, work meant showing up at a specific place at a specific time to tend machines that ran on their own schedule. Factory owners discovered they could maximize profits by running operations 6 days a week, sunrise to sunset. Workers had Sunday off, not for rest, but because forcing people to work on the Christian Sabbath would have triggered riots. But here's where it gets interesting. Workers in 19th century Britain developed their own unauthorized weekend, Saint Monday. Skilled artisans, who often rented workshop space and were paid by the piece rather than by the hour, would regularly skip Monday to extend their Sunday rest. They'd work intensively Tuesday through Saturday to make up the production. Saint Monday wasn't laziness, it was resistance. These workers understood something their employers didn't. Human beings aren't machines. We need rhythm, variation, recovery. The practice became so widespread that by the 1850s, many employers were losing significant Monday productivity to workers who simply didn't show up. Factory owners tried everything to kill Saint Monday. They docked pay, they fired repeat offenders, they hired spies to track workers who claimed to be sick. Nothing worked, so some clever manufacturers tried a different approach. They offered Saturday afternoon off in exchange for guaranteed Monday attendance. The trade-off was brilliant. Workers got their extended break, but on the employer's terms. This is where the story gets complicated, because the weekend wasn't created by worker demands or government regulation alone. It was created by a collision of religious accommodation, industrial efficiency, and commercial opportunity that no one saw coming. Throughout the early 1900s, various factories and mills were experimenting with different arrangements to accommodate religious workers while maintaining productivity. Some gave Jewish workers Saturday off and required Sunday work. Others tried rotating schedules. The breakthrough came when several progressive employers realized that giving everyone both Saturday and Sunday off could solve multiple problems at once. These early adopters discovered something unexpected. Productivity actually increased. Well-rested workers made fewer mistakes. They had fewer accidents. Turnover dropped because people liked their jobs more. Most importantly, they had time to spend their wages, which meant more demand for the products they were making. Henry Ford was watching. In 1914, Ford Motor Company had introduced the revolutionary $5 a day wage, double the industry standard, but Ford was thinking bigger than wages. He was thinking about consumption. In 1926, Ford became the first major American manufacturer to institute a 5-day, 40-hour work week across all operations. Ford's reasoning was pure capitalism. It is the influence of leisure on consumption which makes the short day and the short week so necessary, he wrote. The people who consume the bulk of goods are the people who make them. That is a fact we must never forget. Give workers time off, Ford argued, and they'll spend money on cars, gasoline, vacations, entertainment, all the products of industrial capitalism. But here's what's disturbing about Ford's logic. He wasn't giving workers free time. He was creating consumers. The weekend wasn't liberation from industrial capitalism. It was integration into it. Your Saturday and Sunday weren't yours, they were the economy's. You were free to choose what to buy, where to go, what to do, as long as you were buying, going and doing. The model spread gradually because it worked too well to ignore. By 1929, 48% of American manufacturing workers had Saturday off. The Great Depression accelerated adoption as employers discovered that reducing hours was cheaper than laying off workers entirely. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act made the 40-hour week federal law, with mandatory overtime pay for longer hours. World War II cemented the weekend's place in American culture. Defense plants ran around the clock, but they did it with rotating shifts that preserved the weekend for most workers. When soldiers returned home, they expected the leisure time they'd been promised they were fighting for. But there's a darker thread in this story that most histories ignore. The weekend wasn't equally available to everyone. Domestic workers, mostly women of color, didn't get weekends. They worked in private homes where labor laws didn't apply. Service workers in restaurants, hotels, and entertainment venues worked precisely because everyone else was off. The weekend was built on a foundation of invisible labor by people excluded from its benefits. By 1950, the two-day weekend had become so thoroughly naturalized that Americans couldn't imagine life without it. Suburbs were designed around weekend leisure, shopping centers, movie theaters, parks, golf courses. The entertainment industry restructured itself around Friday night releases and Saturday matinees. Sunday became the day of massive television audiences and family dinners. But something else was happening that would eventually undermine the weekend's foundations. The economy was shifting from manufacturing to services, from products to experiences, from local to global. And these new economic forms didn't respect the temporal boundaries that industrial capitalism had established. The first cracks appeared in the 1980s with the rise of round-the-clock customer service expectations. If your business had customers in multiple time zones, someone had to be working while someone else was having a weekend. Technology accelerated this trend. Email meant work could follow you home. Cell phones meant you were always reachable. The internet meant there was always something that needed immediate attention. Today, the weekend is under assault from multiple directions. The gig economy has no weekends. Uber drivers and freelancers work when demand is highest, which is often Saturday and Sunday. Remote work has blurred the boundaries between work time and personal time. Social media has turned leisure into labor. Your weekend experiences become content to produce and consume. But the most fundamental threat to the weekend isn't technological, it's economic. The weekend was created during an era of rising wages and job security, when a single income could support a family. Today's economic reality requires multiple income streams, constant skill updates, and perpetual availability. The weekend has become a luxury many can't afford. Consider the paradox. We have more labor-saving technology than any generation in history, yet we're working longer hours than our grandparents. Productivity has increased dramatically, but instead of shorter work weeks, we have longer ones. The weekend promised that technology would free us from drudgery. Instead, it's made drudgery portable and perpetual. Some countries are experimenting with 4-day work weeks, hoping to recapture the weekend's promise of work-life balance. Early results suggest that shorter weeks can maintain productivity while improving worker satisfaction. But these experiments face the same challenge that created the weekend in the first place. They only work if everyone agrees to participate. The weekend was never really about time off. It was about synchronized time off, the collective agreement that certain hours belong to life rather than labor. When that synchronization breaks down, the weekend becomes just another scheduling problem to optimize. We're living through the dissolution of one of the most successful social innovations in human history. The weekend created space for everything we claim to value: family, community, creativity, rest, play. Its disappearance isn't just changing how we work, it's changing who we are. The weekend taught us something profound about human nature. We're not just economic units to be optimized for maximum output. We're social beings who need shared rhythms, collective rest, synchronized leisure. The weekend worked because it honored this truth. As we build new economic systems and work arrangements, we might ask, what would it look like to design time around human flourishing rather than economic efficiency? The weekend wasn't inevitable, it was chosen, which means we can choose something else. The question is whether we'll choose it together or whether we'll each negotiate our own private peace with the demands of endless productivity. The weekend's greatest lesson might be that some freedoms only exist when we claim them collectively.